Okay, it's that time again. We're working on our Cabin by the Lake month 4 block of the month kit. Just like all of our other months, our kit has some really great fabrics in it, and they're all labeled. You can see I still have some of my labels on my fabrics here. And a lot of the work that you're gonna do for this month is just cutting small rectangles. Be careful, make sure that you cut them the right size for your cabin. So since this is the only cabin in the quilt, we'll make this look really cute. It also works with templates. So this is an example of one of the paper templates you'll be giving, and I have the other two here. They're lettered for you, A, B, and C. And the way I like to cut out templates is I just cut the paper out that they give you right on the line. So you can see here that I also have some of my templates already cut. The way I cut these is I lay my paper down on the fabric with 1/4 of an inch or about there all the way around, and I pin that paper to the fabric so that when I go to cut my piece, I can lay my 1/4 of an inch ruler along the edge of the paper and make sure I cut that 1/4 of an inch all the way around the paper. And that's how I cut my templates. There's this roof section here that you'll want to pay close attention to. It has you draw lines on it, 4.5 inches over, and then leave 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. But I think it's just as easy to take your template. So this is my B template. And notice I'm not leaving that 1/4 of an inch around the outside of this. I'm going to use the B template here to cut off this excess before I sew it. So this is not like in the pattern instructions. This is something that I've done a little differently that I think makes it a little easier. So I've cut off that excess, and that's just going to be trash because I have over here already cut my sky for B. And you can see that this piece has 1/4 of an inch all the way around the outside edge. So I'm going to place this B section right sides together here, and I'm going to leave a little dog ear, one over here on the corner, and then one here, and I'm going to sew this piece together. So you want to be very careful when you're sewing this because this edge here is all on the bias. That means it's stretchy. So when you sew it, you want to be very careful not to stretch that fabric because it's going to want to shift on you quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press this seam as well. And so you can see now I have my section sewn with my, my sky background already ready to go. So that's one section of my roof. And that's going to be sewn on top of my window section, which I already actually have that sewn together here. So if you're going to have some different reds sewn on top and bottom of your window section. I also have this other part of my roof, this nice little peak here, and you can see that I've already cut this sections out using my templates. And I've added these 1/4 of an inch seam allowances all the way around, so when I sew it, it's going to be the correct size. I also want to make sure that I'm cutting this fabric with the right side of the fabric facing up. So I'm going to go ahead and start, see there's one of my other labels, so I know this is the roof peak. I'm going to start by sewing this section B on, and I just want to leave the little dog here, so that means that I'm not sewing it point to point. I'm leaving about 1/4 of an inch. You can see I kind of cut off a little edge here. I'll kind of show you the front and the back. I don't need this many pens, but when I bring it up to the camera, you can see on the back side, you see I have about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little less, peeking out here. And then also on the bottom, I've got 1/4 of an inch of the red peeking out. So I'm going to go ahead and take this seam, and I'm going to use a scant 1/4 of an inch seam. That way, if I need to square it up, I can. So that just kind of makes it so that I've got a little insurance there. And remember, this is all on the bias as well. So this is going to stretch on you if you're not careful. So I'm going to go ahead and press that seam. So that turned out real nice. So you can see over here on the point that those meet up right here. There's not any excess. I'm going to do the same thing now for my sky on the opposite side. So same thing, I'm going to leave about 1/4 of an inch up here on the top and about 1/4 of an inch there down on the bottom. And I like to use pins, especially when I'm sewing something on the bias. That's going to help from that excess stretch that I don't want. And I'll sew this piece together as well. And I'm using a nice scant 1/4 of an inch seam. That just means a little bit smaller than you normally would, because it's okay if I need to square that up a little bit. And in our pattern instructions, it will tell us how big that piece needs to be. So if you've done it just so, up here at the top, you should have 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the fabric to the point of your roof. So now that's my roof section. So our pattern instructions say that this section here needs to be, let's see, oh, 6.5 by 8.5. So 6.5 tall, perfect, by 8.5 wide. I'm just a little shy of that. You know, everybody's sewing machine's a little bit different, but I'm not going to let that worry me too much. I am going to trim off the these little points here at the top. I don't like to sew like that. Because I'm just going to make that work in my little barn. So I'm going to lay this out so you can see how this is all going to look when it's said and done. You've got your roof top, and that's going to be sewn down with this little bottom section. I actually had excess fabric when I sewed this together. You can see that on my sections. I think these are called I. I've got a little bit excess here, and I think that that was just the pattern. Just gave you a little excess fabric. So I'm just going to cut that off because that piece needs to be the same size as the one on top of it. So it also needs to measure 8.5 wide. So now that's the same size, and these are going to be sewn top and bottom together. And then I've got my section that has the windows. This is going to get sewn with that other roof section on top of it. And so once these two are sewn on top of each other, then I'll be ready to trim that up. Let me zoom this out because this is a nice big block. Or can I only go in? Oh, I can only go in. Well, hopefully you can see that I've got this really cool sky fabric up here that's got my chimneys. And then also you have this filler fabric, and isn't that perfect? That grass, I love it. And then the sky, and that's going to go on the very far side of your block. After this part is sewn together, you're going to have the filler. So I hope you enjoyed making your little cabin and using templates for the month 4 of the Cabin by the Lake block of the month.